made a mistake, for which I am sorry. But let me also ask for some understanding. Not only was this a painful personal dilemma, but I had to deal with it when I was new to this institution and I was trying to navigate in uncharted waters.
All right, World Bank President Paul Wolfowitz, the former Deputy Secretary of Defense, is now in hot water for allegedly promoting his girlfriend and giving her an abnormally fat paycheck. Joining me now is Krishna Guha, Chief U.S. Economics Correspondent for the Financial Times, and Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal Editorial Board Senior Economics Editor. Krishna, it's almost like the FT is running a jihad against Wolfowitz. You guys got him on the front page every day. You're editorializing against him. And my question to you is this. The woman, Shaha Riza, she was already at the World Bank in an important job in the Middle East. So her boyfriend, there's nothing illegal about that, becomes the president of the bank. Now, what is she supposed to do?
Okay, well, listen, first of all, the idea that the FT has a jihad against Mr. Wolfowitz is a laughable one. What we have sought to do in this affair is to report the facts, to do so rigorously, and I believe we've done that. We've also provided the explanation of the narrative as to what happened here. My colleagues on the editorial board, which I'm not a part, have taken a view that this means that Mr. Wolfowitz should go. I absolutely reject the notion there's any jihad involved.
Well, I don't, look, Krishna, all I know is I read the FT every day because it's a fine newspaper and I know a lot of people there, but it's just, you've been running this story more than anybody, and I just don't get this because you're talking about moral authority. That's the problem here. And somehow, knowing that these two had a legitimate relationship and the boyfriend comes in as the head of the bank, puts her in a spot, she's got to leave the bank. That's what the rules say. I don't know how you get out of this cleanly. And I don't think you've cut Wolfowitz any slack at all.
Can I explain to you what we see, and many others see, as the main corporate governance issue here? This has nothing to do with the relationship that Mr. Wolfowitz had or has with Shaha Riza. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. The question is whether it was appropriate for him to be personally involved in dictating attractive terms for her secondment. Clearly there was a conflict of interest there. Mr. Wolfowitz acted without the advice of the World Bank's senior legal officer at the time, and he ordered the bank's head of human resources to provide attractive terms to Shaha Riza. Those terms were not seen by the board's ethics committee. All this adds up to a very serious lapse of corporate governance. Whether that is sufficient to call for his resignation or not is a matter of opinion. I personally won't voice an opinion on that.
All right, fair enough. Steve Moore, what do you make of this?
No question there was an ethical lapse here. I agree with that. But I do think the real story here is that since the day that Wolfowitz walked in that door, as a reformer, Larry, as someone who was going to clean up the bureaucracy and change the behavior of the World Bank, which is really one of the biggest wastes of money in all of international lending, I think when you talk about jumping into hot water, he jumped into hot water when he took that job. The outrage here is that we still spend $2 billion a year giving money to the World Bank. It has had no impact in terms of bringing any type of development to the world. And let's just get rid of the whole agency. It's corrupt from top to bottom.
Now, Krishna, what's your response to that?
I think that's ideology masquerading as argument, if you'll forgive me for saying so. The U.S. administration, if you talk to Hank Paulson or his officials in Treasury, will tell you that they believe that the World Bank does a good job in difficult circumstances in promoting growth in the developing world. They're very active in a number of post-conflict situations like Liberia. They're doing their best under Mr. Wolfowitz's direction to help out in Iraq right now. I think the idea that the World Bank is riddled with corruption is laughable. There's no evidence to support that.
It's not laughable. Look, this isn't laughable at all. We have 20 years of evidence that shows whatever the World Bank does, when they go into a country, that's a country as an investor you want to short, because the advice of the IMF and the World Bank are almost always wrong-headed. For 20 years it's been run by Keynesians who tell countries not to cut taxes, to get their budget deficits under control. And, you know, you look at the model around the world in terms of economic growth, and you look what's happening in East Europe with flat taxes in Ireland. I mean, growth is not complicated, and the World Bank, I think, does complicate it by telling countries the way you get rich is by getting grants from government institutions.
Krishna, let me, we don't have as much time as I would like, but let me just ask you something. This lady, Shaha Riza, I've never met her. I've known Mr. Wolfowitz many years, but I don't know this one. Tell me if this is wrong. Because Paul Wolfowitz comes in, because they have a relationship, she's going to have to leave. So he basically gets her a job, or somebody gets her a job in the State Department.
Yeah.
But wouldn't she have taken, under any circumstances, a large lump sum payment from the World Bank because her career would effectively be terminated as a result of conditions beyond her control? And I admit Wolfowitz may have not done this according to Hoyle perfectly, but it looks like a minor infraction. She would have gotten a big increase in her salary no matter what happened.
Well, that's kind of right and kind of wrong. Look, the board's ethics committee at the time and the other senior advisor of the bank did indeed say that, look, whatever happened, if Miss Reeser had to leave, she should be given compensation. The figure of $50,000 to $60,000 compensation was floated by officials at the bank. Now, what happened instead was that Mr. Wolfowitz directed on his personal authority that she should be given a pay rise initially to $180,000. This is net of tax, by the way. So that's way more than Condoleezza Rice, for instance, earns at the State Department where she was going to work. He then insisted that she would get 8% annual increments, which is way above the average for the bank. And he also insisted that she be given one promotion up front and two more possibly to come afterwards.
You're absolutely right that he had a conflict of interest. I think this was an ethical mistake, Larry. But as Krishna just said, Wolfowitz is a reformer. Some of the things that he's doing at the World Bank are turning this institution very slowly around. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think this is the bureaucracy that doesn't want this institution changed, and they don't want it reformed.
I think it's a question of practicing what you preach.
Yeah, but you gotta admit, Christian, you gotta give him some credit. The World Bank staff has not liked Wolfowitz, A, because he is a reformer, but B, because he was an architect. Hang on. He was an architect of the Iraq War. He was an architect of the Iraq War. That's the untold. That's the elephant in the living room. Oh, sure it is. That's the elephant in the living room here.
They've been shooting at him from the day he entered office.
We might have more of this. Depending on how long this thing goes on, Christian, we're going to have you back because this may be more interesting.
Shut down the World Bank.
Welcome to Kudlow and Company,
Mr.
Krishna.
Wolfowitz doesn't want to shut down the World Bank. He really believes in its mission.
Against him.
I don't know. Me, I love those tax-free salaries, Steve Moore. How come we don't get a piece of that?
We should get a piece of that action, too.
Krishna Guha, Steve Moore, thank you very much.